So this interface allows us to compile batches of invoices entered into the system to allow us to convert and transfer the data into another accounting system. So in order to start, we would create a new batch. We would automatically make some selections that apply, and I'm just going to put in today's date. We would click create the batch, and then we're in a custom modal specific to the batch that we've created, and we're able to then choose from the invoices which ones we want to assign to the batch. So you can see that there's multiple pages of invoices here, and these are all filtered and defined as ready for batching. So I'm going to make a few selections here. And you can see that when I make the selections, we have some green buttons appear. This tells us not only how many we've selected, and that's relevant because we have a limit of 30, but we then are able to assign them to the batch. You can see they move from the lower register table into the upper register table, and we can see the details about them. And you can see that the sequencing, which is defined as a part number, automatically organizes the selected invoice based on the alphabeticalization of the vendor name and the invoice date. So you'll notice that even though these three are for the same vendor, they are organized in invoice date order, so 16, 17, 20. This sequencing is very important as part of another process within this. Once we have selected all of our batch entries, we then need to click Save and Continue. And what this then allows us to do is to access the green buttons that are on the top of this menu bar up here, which have stages. So we have 5 stages that we have to go through. So I'm going to click Save and Continue. And you'll notice that the first green button has now become visible, and that's because we've now associated invoices to our batch, and we are now able to download the data into a CSV file that is used for transfer of data into the accounting system. Once we generate our CSV for Viewpoint, we would then have the next button become visible. We then go through a series of steps where we generate approval files using Exact Forms Plus that compile data together for each of the invoices based on the invoice that's been uploaded and the generated approval file. Those get combined together as approval files. And then a third step is to generate what we call a batch file. Now, a batch file is where we bring all of those individual approval files together into a single document using a PDF merge tool, and that creates a single file output. We then have a fourth step, which is to download via zip. And what happens with that is we need this single batch file, but we also need each of the individual approval files for each invoice that got generated in step 2, and we need them in a single downloadable file so that we can upload and associate those individual files to the individual entries that have been created in Viewpoint from the CSV download in step 1, and we then also apply that batch file against that batch as well. Once we've got all of the outputs from QuickBase, there's a fifth step, which is to mark the batch as Viewpoint complete, which essentially is just populating a date time field. We can unassign invoices as well. So if we had made any errors or changes that we no longer want a particular vendor's invoice in our batch, we can select the ones that we don't want. You'll notice when I remove them from the batch, they're going to go back down into that lower register, and the sequencing of these invoices is going to change. So I'm going to click remove. You'll see now that Claremont is 1 and Crest is 2. So you can see that we've got some very pretty functionality in here. The indicators on the right hand side actually allow us to embed and display the specific distributions that that invoice has in it, and you can see that we can open multiple ones at a time. This particular invoice has a lot more distributions because of the type of invoice it is, and these are all displayed here. So the user does have the ability to navigate through the list of distributions for an individual invoice if they need to look at that. And these columns are all from data records inside QuickBase. I am going to now remove that invoice from the batch, and I'm going to remove that last one. And I'm going to hit save and close, because what I want to show you now is that I created a batch which I no longer want. So I can have a series of batches created which I can then launch in that edit screen which we were just working through. But I can also delete a batch that is no longer valid as long as it doesn't have any invoices. So I can delete the batch that I created.